All right, here we are with I would say a colleague now, because you're kind of in the principal role again. And this is James Moffett that is with us today on the Trauma Informed Educators Network podcast. So James, how are you, man? And what's the James Moffett story? Tell us about you.
I'm great, actually. I'm tired, which I think every principal in America would say right now, or globally, I should say, would say. But I'm excited to be with you, and our stories parallel so much. I'm excited to have a conversation with you, and we were able to connect a couple years ago and have text conversations, phone conversations since then. But it's awesome to be in this realm with you as well. But for me, this is my 17th year in education. It sounds weird to even say that, but I'm that guy who, as a third grader, knew I wanted to get in education. It was something I've always wanted to do. I knew I wanted to teach. But even as a third grader, I knew I wanted to go beyond teaching. As a third grader, I knew I wanted to teach. I knew I wanted to be a principal. I knew I wanted to be a superintendent. So, and I've always had this kind of goal in my head of like a 10-10-10 process where I was going to teach for 10 years, be a principal for 10 years, and then be a superintendent for at least 10 years. So I did my 10 years of teaching, and now I'm in my 6th year as an administrator. And it's been great. And it's my second school, and I'm starting over again, starting fresh. And I don't look at it as starting over as I look at it with starting with a fresh set of eyes and coming into it with just a different perspective. So like I said, I spent 10 years as a classroom teacher. I spent 2 years teaching kindergarten, 2 years teaching 1st grade, 6 years teaching 5th grade. And then I jumped straight from 5th grade teacher to principal, which is a big jump. And what I always tell people, it's just kind of your perspective changes. And I remember as a classroom teacher, I just felt like I'm controlling these 4 walls, and I'm trying to give everything I have in these 4 walls, and I'm loving kids, and I'm giving kids exactly what they need. And whether it was naive or what, I just assumed that was happening in every classroom, in every building that I was ever in, right? And so then you step out of that role and you step into administration, and rather than looking at these 4 walls, you're looking at 35 different sets of 4 walls and trying to navigate what's happening in all those spaces and making sure that teachers are supported to support kids. So the perspective definitely changes. Last year, I spent a year kind of just being a consultant, a trauma-informed consultant, traveled all over the country, and it was crazy. It was busy, but I learned so much, and I was so excited about coming back into a building where I can kind of apply all the things that I saw and all the things I was able to experience. But when it comes to trauma-informed work, I was not a trauma-informed teacher. I share that with everybody. That was not my realm because that's not how I was raised. That's not the classrooms that I had as a child. My parents were extremely strict, and that's kind of the mindset that I went into teaching with. And probably 7 or 8 years ago now, I actually my story started just like yours. I stumbled into a screening of Paper Tigers, and I got to get to know Jim. And Jim's kind of the grandfather of this for me, for like trauma-informed care. And he became a friend. I watched Paper Tigers. I reached out to him. I said, hey, teach me more. I really, just watching that film, it really resonated with me. It made sense to me, that importance or that connection between loving kids and building strong relationships with kids and with staff. That really spoke to me. And it was so different and such a paradigm shift to what I was doing previous to that. And so I just began to just have conversation after conversation after conversation with him. And I read Help for Billy. That was another game changer for me. And then we kind of worked with the staff and kind of led them from being a very traditional school in terms of social emotional learning and discipline and behavior, and moved towards being a trauma-informed school. And it was eye-opening for me. But more than that, I think you can probably speak to this as well, just the culture within a building and how that completely changes. And school becomes an experience. It's not just this mundane 8 to 3 everyday thing. It becomes an all-encompassing experience where you're not just looking at the academics anymore, but you're looking at truly the whole child. And I think, for us, we hear that cliche, whole child, and it just becomes so cliche at this point. But when you truly step into it, it really does encompass not just the whole child, it's the whole family, it's the whole community, it's every aspect of a child's life that you can truly touch and you can truly impact. And that's what being trauma-informed really meant to me. And that's kind of the shift that it took me through. So being back in the building now with a fresh set of eyes, I'm so excited about what we're able to do. And we've already done a great amount of work in a pandemic, which is crazy, but we've done so much work already, but I'm excited about the path we're going on.
And a lot resonates with what you say to kind of my thinking. And I just put a graphic out this week on social media. It's time to it's past time to rehumanize education, right? And what you just said speaks to that, in that we're educating children not just giving them an education. There's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And so connecting to kids on a relational level, that safe, stable, nurturing relationship level, that doesn't mean all kids don't have it at home. It doesn't mean that parents are terrible. It doesn't mean that every kid has experienced trauma. I want my own child who's never experienced trauma to experience an adult at school that loves him, that invests in him, that believes in him. So I think the power of what you say and what you do is always back to what your shirt says, love kids. It's literally that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, there's so much. And when I'm doing the consulting work, of course, I started with the scientific piece. Like, we have to understand the science behind what we're doing. I get that. But like, where I think I differ is when I'm going out to a school, I'm not going to spend hours on the science piece of this. Like, that's something you can research, you can learn on your own. What I want to talk to people about is the practicality and the intentionality behind just connecting and loving kids. That's all it is. That's all this is about. And, for me, the eye-opening part of this year, I think I've always known that this approach isn't just about kids. But I've learned even more so this year as we're going through what we're going through, that this approach is what staff needs as well. And so it's about putting that intentionality and that practicality around the relationships among staff as well. That's gone so far for us as a building this year.
Kids. It seems like I'm having some technical difficulties. I don't know what's happening. If you're listening to this, there we go. I think we're cutting in and out. I'm sorry about that. But what I've always said is this is 100% about adults. It's about how adults are managing, because kids have always brought trauma, right? Kids have always brought experiences. These things have always been around.
Yeah.
And I think that is key. So let's talk about, because you've been in one school, you've kind of shifted this paradigm, and now you're in another, and you're building the capacity of the adults by looking at the adults, right? So talk about systems change, because I feel like that's a passion of yours. What does that look like from your perspective as a school administrator and future superintendent, I should say?
Yeah. And I think, I want to talk about that, but I'll go back to your last statement, because it's so true. It's about adults, but it's not about adults. And I put a quote out probably 2 years ago, and I said, at the essence of being trauma informed is realizing that it's all about the adults, but it really has nothing to do about the adults. And it's kind of, it's crazy in the way that we can support adults to be what kids need. And I think one of the things that people get on me about is I say, I'm all for kids every day, all day. But being all for kids doesn't mean that I don't support staff. I want to make sure that we understand that. But the decisions that I make are all about kids. And then the work that comes after that is, how do I support staff to have the ability to do what we said we're going to do when it comes to doing what's best for kids at all times. And I think that's the difference that I need people to understand. But as we go about like navigating change and systems processes, for me, and this doesn't even just apply to trauma-informed care. There's kind of a 4-step process, and I call it navigating change. And that's what we talk about in the state of Kansas. We have this whole navigating change document as we respond to COVID and respond to redesign within our schools. But when we navigate change, no matter what the change is, I think the first step is always going to be, how do I connect to somebody's heart? So, we all come from different backgrounds. We all have varying perspectives that we're bringing into a building where we're ultimately trying to accomplish the same goal. But sometimes the way we want to accomplish that goal is different based on our experience. So as a staff, over the last 2 weeks, when we came back from Christmas break, we extended our Christmas break a little bit because of COVID. But we had some PD with staff. And the first day we came back was actually the day after everything that happened at the Capitol. And so I'm driving to work that day, and I have an idea of, this is the PD that I want our staff to get on today. And it was about behavior, and it was about relationships anyway, but something was eating at me. This is this elephant in the room that traditionally for so long, we choose not to talk about politics. We choose not to talk about religion. And I know why we do, but at the same time, we have to address it at some point. And so I'm thinking, and I get this Facebook post comes up about this community circles and restorative circles. And they actually scripted out these questions for us about, how do you address this? And it was intended to be with kids, but I thought, you know what, as a staff, with so many unique perspectives coming back, I think we need to have this conversation. So we sat in several circles and we went through this exercise where we talked about the importance of sharing perspective, and then actually listening, but not listening with the intent to respond or listening with the intent to change somebody's perspective, but listening with the intent to understand why they feel the way that they do. And when we can have conversations like that, that's when we connect with people's hearts. When we can be open and honest about how we feel and why we feel the way we do and why we are, how our experiences, I should say, shape the decisions that we make and shape our actions, that's huge. And what I began to see in that conversation, we talked for 45 minutes to an hour just about the events of the day before and allowing people to express how they feel. But after that, I had so many staff members come and say, that was very real and that was genuine. And that was the best PD I've ever experienced. And I felt that way too. But I think what made it so real and such an incredible experience for staff is that they were able to connect on a heart level. And I think so many times we never connect on a heart level. So we're never able to gain the momentum to bring about the change that we're hoping to get to. And so for me, in my perspective, going into all these schools last year, where I saw people missing it was they knew where they wanted to go, but they wanted to jump to the systems and processes or jump to the application. It looks like this, but they never took the time to, one, I think that first step is connecting with people's hearts. Because when I can connect with somebody's heart, then and only then can we begin to talk about mindsets, because we know this is a huge mindset shift for so many people, myself included. But I can't just go in and say, this is how I expect you to believe. I want you to believe this, 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 and this about kids. That's not okay. Like once I've connected with your heart, then I can begin to share mindsets. And so I have these 10 trauma-informed mindsets that I like to walk people through. And I'm really quick to tell people, when I share these 10 mindsets with you, I don't expect you to overnight just accept them and just let that be your Bible. That's not the way this is going to work. But for me, because even for me, I didn't believe all 10 of them if you would ask me 6 or 7 years ago. But after going through a process of change, when I look back and I reflect on what would have been helpful for me as a principal or helpful for my teachers and staff and helpful for kids, these are kind of those 10 big picture things that I want people to begin to accept and understand. So then we can begin to shift people's mindsets to get them to look at something different. Because when I connect with somebody on our heart level and I know who they are and I value and I understand and I empathize with them, then I can say, I know their thinking is different than mine, but because I'm connected with them on a heart level, I can better receive a mindset shift and I can better understand why they feel the way that they do. And I think for us as administrators, we have to get to that point, because that's when our staff begins to trust us, because this is all about trust. Because for leadership, for change to happen, you have to begin to trust the people who are bringing about the change. And so, connect with hearts, we can connect with mindsets, and then we can have conversations about, these are the systems and processes that are going to allow us to act out those mindsets. If we can do these things, these systematic things, if we put these processes in place within our building, we're going to begin to enact change. I tell this story all the time about Mrs. Houston. Mrs. Houston was a para at my first school, and she was incredible. She was a sped para. She was able to connect with kids. But to me, her most important job, and one of the processes that we had to put in place to really get kids and get staff to understand that loving kids thing, her first job every single day was she went and she got a list from our clerk of every kid that was absent the day before. And she went and she found every single one of them and said, welcome back to school, we missed you. That in itself was the process that we had to make time for and build into our schedule, that put into action loving kids, that put into action the care and concern that we had for our kids and our staff. And so she even expanded it, and she was going to staff who were gone the day before and giving them little notes and saying, hey, I missed you. And she connected with the 5th grade class, and they made these little notes that says, hey, we missed you. We're so glad you're back. And if I was gone for a conference or a presentation, I'd find one on my desk when I got back. But that was that type of connection that made people understand how much we truly cared about them. We cared about them beyond just the academic piece. We cared about them more than just the perfect attendance award or whatever. It was, we truly care about you. You talk about humanizing education. That's humanizing education. So heart, mindset, systems, and processes, and then we can talk about the application. So those are kind of those 4 steps that I think in any type of change, yes, in trauma-informed care, but in any type of change you're looking to bring into an organization or a school, those are kind of the 4 steps that I want people to walk through.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, people aren't going to change because you tell them to change, right? We know that. That's just basic psychology. People aren't just going to, and there's a lot that goes into it. And I think what I heard you say was, and I think I want the listeners to hear, sometimes we make things much more complex than they need to be.
For sure.
Right? It really is about making those touch points. At my school, we have a team of greeters at the front door every single day when kids are in person, right?
Yeah.
Now we have navigators that when a kid doesn't show up that day, we have a team that calls them, hey, is everything okay?
Yeah.
Right? It's that same thing. We're doing food delivery box. It's those little things. It's not these major giant shifts at first. It's making those heart-to-heart connections, those mindset shifts begin to happen when the hearts are connected 100%. And as a leader and as a school leader, I think I see this the most as being the missing piece, where a lot of administrators just want to say, this is what we're doing, we're going to do it, right? No, it can't come that way. It's got to come, just like you said, through the heart connection. Such powerful thought. And I mean, you're spot on. And I've experienced it myself as a leader of having to make those connections.
And you're right. And I think, when we have opportunities to share with other leaders, I think one of the things I always want to say is I didn't get this right always the first time. You know what I mean? Like going into it, I didn't understand. I didn't truly understand this. I went into it with, this is what we're going to do. But I think part of it is those connections lead you to having the staff or the right staff where they feel comfortable. I have people even on my staff now or my previous staff who would come to me and say, hey, you missed it here. Like, we were with you until you did that, and I don't understand. And so it was good to have those people who could put you in check or hold you accountable. And so even now, that whole accountability piece is huge. And one of the things I tell, and this goes beyond just school, this is any organization, you have to have 3 things for an organization to be successful. You have to have accountability, structure, and consequences. You have to have all those things. You don't have those things, you're not going to be successful. But that accountability piece, one of the things that frustrates me so much about school, and this is how we started our school year, we talked about these imaginary hierarchies because we have them in every system, especially in schools where we have, school leadership, principals and superintendents are on this level, they say. And then we have teachers under there. And then we have our classified and paraprofessionals under there. And so we have this imaginary hierarchy. But what those systems do is they don't allow change to happen the way it's supposed to. And so for me, I need a system that's aligned this way where we're all on the same level as far as holding one another accountable. So if I'm the classified staff, if I'm the custodian and I see somebody who's not loving kids the way they're supposed to, or if I see somebody who's not living in action the things that we say we're doing, through relationship, I can have a conversation. I think that's why it goes back to relationship, because, a conversation where there's no relationship can easily turn into confrontation. But when there's a relationship, it stays a conversation where what's being said is received and heard and listened to. And so we have to work really, really hard to have this transparent, not a hierarchy like this, but just a system where we're all on the same page as far as accountability.
And that comes from vulnerability, right?
Oh, sure.
And I think you know this, and I know this as a leader, we have to model that. And I think I've had experiences just like what you said, Portel, like this didn't work. Or, hey, you approach this way, and let me tell you the ripple effect. That's what leaders need. We need people to keep us in check. I love to tell the story of, I had an escalated child in the library, and he was a kid that when he escalated, I was the target. I mean, it just happened, and I was fine with it. But this day he picked up this wooden sphere, and he was leaning back, and it was coming at me, and I just lost it. And my librarian, Miss Price, she goes, you need to go back to your office right now. And it was like, dude, go. You're making the situation worse. And I had to think her, like, you saw I was not in a space of co-regulation. I was not in a space of supporting this kid, and I needed to leave. When you get to that space in your school, that's when the work begins. That's when the processes start. That's when you can see staff taking care of each other as a priority to them and the kids, and seeing that the relationships bloom. Such a fact. I mean,
talk about co-regulation. I think, and I believe in that. We know the science behind that, like regulation brings upon regulation, but just like co-regulation helps bring regulation, there's this thing, dysregulation brings dysregulation. And so we have to check ourselves. And so another process or a system in place that we talked about at the beginning of the year is like thumbs up, thumbs down, because I don't care who you are at what level. That's why that hierarchy has to be gone. If I'm, as the principal, walking down the hallway and I see you engage with the student, I'm looking at the adult and I'm giving you a thumbs up or thumbs down. And thumbs up is you telling me, I got this. We're working through this together. Like, just keep it moving. And I'm gonna keep it moving. I'm not gonna step in and step on your toes. But if you give me that thumbs down, that's you telling me, and this is big for me, that's you telling me you want me to be part of the conversation with you, not that I'm going to take over the conversation for you. And so I think that's another one of those systems, but we have to get to the connecting with my heart, connecting with having the same mindset. So when we're on the same mindset, we know the ultimate goal. We know that. And one of my mindset shifts is, I can't deal with the situation when I'm escalating. I can't work through or process a situation when a student is escalated, because two escalated people trying to solve a problem, that's never going to work. So checking ourselves to know that first we have to regulate before we can co-regulate or help somebody else regulate. Those are all systems and processes we have to talk about after we connect with hearts and mindsets.
I love the thumbs up and thumbs down. That's an unofficial process that we use.
Simple,
And sometimes people walk by me, they're like, "You good?" And I'm like, "I'm good." Like the child is escalated and I'm standing there giving them space, checking in with them. And I'm like, "No, we're good." And they're like, "Okay." And I think that there's power in that with a staff when, one, you trust them enough to just say, "Do you need me or not? If you need me, I'm here. Not, I'm walking." And I think those are little pieces that schools sometimes miss, trying to get it right? Trying to do the process. Those are the processes, and those are what we don't talk about. And those are the what we do, right? That I think that people need to be digging into. So let's talk about right now in this, you started in a new school during a pandemic. Talking about trauma-informed education. I've got my own opinions about the opportunities in the midst of a pandemic, because I think there's a lot, because the system is automatically disrupted. So we have a ton of opportunity to do things differently, because people are in that mindset of, we got to do it different. So talk about your experience at this point of stepping into a new school in the midst of a pandemic and having the mindset you have. What did you walk into? What was it like?
I think I was fortunate, because when you come into a situation like this, it has the potential to go south really, really quickly. But because of the district leadership, as well as the staff that I was walking into, I think we've made the best of it. And I think not just the best of it, we've done well. And I think one of the presentations I've been giving a lot is like the possibilities in the pandemic. Because I try to be optimistic. I try to be a glass half full type of person. And so there's so many positives that have come out of this pandemic. So here in Kansas, we talk about redesign. And so the goal was that every school in the state of Kansas was going to be redesigned and look different and think about education differently. And what this pandemic has done is it's kind of forced the issue. We've had to make that shift to redesign what schools look like faster than we had anticipated. But we all know this. Anybody who's been in education for a long time knows education has needed to change anyway. We've been trying to make this, I give this graphic, and I've heard other people talk about this. We've been trying this leave it to beaver model of how we respond to behavior and how we in academics. And we're trying to make this leave it to beaver model work with this Family Guy culture. And like, it just doesn't go together. It doesn't work. And rather than make the change that we knew we needed to make, we just kept trying and trying and trying to make this work. And it wasn't working. And we talk so much about that, the meaning of insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what we've been doing. So this has really forced us to change. And one of the things that I think I saw early on in March when this first happened was I saw almost a forced empathy. Like we were all in this vulnerable state of being empathetic for one another. Parents were more empathetic towards teachers than they've ever been. And teachers were more empathetic towards parents than they've ever been. And so the struggle for us is, as we shift back to whatever normal is or non-COVID times, how do we maintain that empathy both ways as we go back to brick and mortar full time? Or how do we maintain this focus on social emotional learning? Because we've seen such a focus on social emotional learning, and you and I, we've known it need to be there for years, but it wasn't always acceptable, because we were so intent on academics. So now when this pandemic comes along, all of us take a step back and say, wow, we need to be checking in with our kids. We need to be checking on their social emotional health. I hope that focus remains when we're back in non-COVID brick and mortar times, because I think, like, again, those are the positives that I see. Now the struggle for leadership is, how do I maintain that positive trajectory that we're on when it comes to those things?
You're spot on. And I think too, thinking about it, I've talked to a lot of people about, well, how's your school during the pandemic? And I'm going to be honest, obviously my teachers the teachers I work with are stressed, they're overwhelmed, they're trying to navigate. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, learning is happening.
Yeah.
That teachers are showing up. They're putting the stress on themselves because they want to continue to sustain high quality education for every kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to the movement, we didn't miss a beat because we had the structures and systems and connections and relationships with our families in place. So we just had to readjust how we navigated and how we gave the opportunity for learning to kids.
Yeah.
You know, we went to a one-to-one in one district in the matter of 2 months. We were dying for technology in my school, and it's like, bam, now we have one-to-one. You all, this is an opportunity. Let's think about how we're looking at these pieces, right? We still do our morning meetings. We still have our morning gatherings. I still call parents. I still call kids. I still jump into classrooms. We have to reimagine what the expectation is. Just today, we have legislation going through my state that they're trying to hold back any third grader that isn't on grade level for a year, right? Yeah. Again, we're thinking content. We're not thinking kids. We're not thinking lives.
Yeah.
These things, and the legislator said in the news, well, you know, we've always done school for the last 100 years. 100 years we've done school like this, and every school should be in classrooms today. And if not, they're going to penalize every school in the state of Tennessee that isn't back in person full time. You know, like this is the paradigm we're trying to shift, and it can start with a school. Do you not agree? One school.
I agree. I think that's why, you know, we have to look at trauma-informed care, especially outside the four walls of our building. And I think one of the things as I was traveling, I heard a lot of from educators was the frustration of this shift towards trauma-informed care, where we're looking at all these different components of care for a child. And they would get frustrated because they say, we work our butts off every day to instill this in our kids within these four walls. And they go back to an environment at home where it's not the focus. And so my response always was, well, you have the opportunity to shift something here so the shift can then begin to happen outside of our four walls. And some of the most rewarding moments for me, there's two that stand out right away, was when the emails I get from parents when we one of our tier 1 interventions at my previous school was to have a peace corner in every classroom. We talked about regulation. We talked about how kids could utilize those peace corners. And when I got the email from the parent that says, you know, my kid at home has created their own peace corner at home. And I see them not blowing up, not getting escalated to the point of being violent or saying things they shouldn't be saying. I see them going to their peace corner and practicing some of those breathing exercises that you teach your kids at school. To me, that's that shift actually happening outside of our four walls. And the other one that really stood out to me, I had a mom in my office. I was doing morning announcements, and part of our morning announcements, we do deep breathing every single morning. We talk about we have this safekeeper statement that comes from conscious discipline, where we go back and forth, and I say, or our staff say together, we will keep you safe. And our kids say, we will help you keep us safe. Then we say, we will help you learn. Our kids say, we'll help you help us learn. And we end it by saying, I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. That's our statement to kids every single day. That's the calm response that we have. And so I had a parent stop by my office after the morning announcement in tears. And she says, I've never been in a place, in a school specifically, where I hear love expressed so genuinely and so real. And she says, I was a student from trauma. And if I would have had this as a student, I think I would have been impacted in a very positive way. And so she went on to say she was thankful that her kids were experiencing that. So now coming into a new school, that's been my motto for years. I stole it from church years ago. I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. I want kids to hear that every single day. So coming to a new school, when you start saying that, and you have kids that look at you like, because that's foreign to them. That's a new concept to them. But even last week when we had our PD before kids came back, as a couple of weeks ago, we were having conversations, and one of our paraprofessionals said, you know what? We say that every single day. And I didn't understand it until I started hearing kids say it back to me. That's so impactful to me. So there's so many positives in these pandemics, but again, it goes back to, I guess, those systems and processes. What do you have in place to allow those things to happen? And I think as leaders and as teachers, we have to accept that everybody's not good at relationships. There's teachers who aren't great at relationships. They're not always going to happen organically like we wish they could. So again, how do we organize our day to focus on relationships so even the person who's not the best at it gets better at it and they feel connected to their kids?
And I think too, some of the hard pieces for some educators to get is the return may not be immediate.
Yeah.
Right. The return may not happen right now. It may not even happen while the child is at your school.
Yep.
But knowing that we're planting seeds that can grow later. And when you said what you just said about kids saying to adults they love them, that just happened to me, a student that I haven't had for 2 years. And I'm not going to cry, although I'm not afraid to cry, and I cry in front of my staff all the time. But this child was getting he came by and somebody said, "Hey, Portel, somebody's wanting to see you." And I'm like, "Who is it?" They're like, "I think it's a previous student. I don't know him. It was my secretary who had just started this year." So I walked out, student, he had grown so much. He'd been a couple of years. We talked. And as he goes to swing the van door closed, he goes, "Hey, Portel." And I said, "Yeah, bud." He said, "I love you." And I said, "I love you too, man."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that right there was like, man, that he knew that we had after years of him being gone. And that makes some educators uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That makes them go, "Ooh, that's such a," no, I genuinely love and care about this child. And he genuinely loves and cares for me, which is exactly what we need kids to leave our schools with.
Yep.
We need them to feel loved. And at the end of the day, they may not come back to us. They may go on and make poor choices like many of us did. I know I did.
Yep.
Right? It is coming to that point of we've got to see beyond just the surface of what we've always done. However, and I think you're going to agree, James, where we miss the mark is when that's all we focus on. We have to teach our kids. We have to give them the highest quality education possible, no matter where they're from, if they've had trauma. So it's this balance, right?
Well, I agree. And I think, going back to my experiences in consulting and going into schools and seeing the work that they've done, I think one of the things that all of us struggle with as we make this shift is we begin to make this shift towards being trauma informed. And I like to talk about this phrase called firm compassion. That's the phrase that I use a lot because we don't use those words together nearly enough. And I think what I see in schools, and usually schools who fail or miss the mark, is you begin to understand what it means to be trauma sensitive and trauma informed and trauma responsive and trauma invested. You go through those phases in this continuum. And what generally happens, you have some staff who go to an extreme where they are so overly empathetic. And I hate to use that word that way, but I think people understand what I mean. Empathetic to the point where they let kids get away with everything. There's no consequences. Just kids are running wild. And to them, in their mind, that's what it means to be trauma informed. But at the same time, you have another portion of staff sometimes who are so against this because they don't understand. We haven't connected with their heart, probably. We haven't got them to understand the mindset shifts. So because they're so against us, they go to the other extreme and they become so rigid and so strict that that's not a place where I want people to be either. And so for me, part of being trauma informed is getting to this middle ground of firm compassion, because I can love a kid and still be firm. I can love a kid and show compassion every single day. But that middle ground of firm compassion is where I feel a trauma-informed school should live. Like we have to be there.
And our mutual friend Jim in his book makes the great comparison of General Patton and Fred Rogers, right? Like you've got to, just like my own child. I love him so much. I'm not going to let him do this.
Exactly right.
And I have had that conversation so many times with kids. I love you to the point that you cannot do this. It's not safe.
You
right?
stole the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I say. You're right. That's it. It's not the same thing.
No, and I'm going to be honest. I've in my 6 years at Fall Hamilton, we've been through some highs and lows. We've been through I've had people go, Portel, you're getting way too soft because you get to intimately know these families and you get to learn. And then it's like, whoa, no. I have a higher expectation for you because I know you.
Exactly right.
Because I know your mama, because we know each other, I'm going to have even a higher expectation.
And I think if you compare it back to, my classroom as a teacher, anytime I changed a behavioral expectation or routine or a system within my classroom, there's initially chaos because we're all kids, especially in this mindset of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Yesterday, when we had this system, I knew I could do this, this, and this, but now we're changing our system. I'm not sure. So there's that initial chaos. And so at my first school, as we began to make the shift, with 500 kids in 25 classrooms, when you make that shift, there is that initial chaos. And what I tell people is that it's almost like you have to embrace the chaos as a way of knowing we're beginning to make change. Now, what I do next is what's important. How do I rein in that chaos and put it under the umbrella of love, care, compassion, relationship? How do I do that? That's the hard part that people struggle with sometimes.
You know, and Alex,
to get there.
And I think you know Alex Chevron.
Yeah, I think their last. Yeah,
you know her whole thing is embrace the mess, because this is messy.
Yeah, it is.
It is messy work, and there's going to be missteps, and there's going to be step backs, and there's going to be conversations. It's hard work. When you're talking about hard work, this is a classic hard work, because not only are we truly trying to make adjustments for kids in our school, we're trying to shift systems that are rooted in these behaviorist mindset and thinking.
Yeah,
man. But when it clicks, James, and you agree, because I'm right now in it in my school. Yeah. When it clicks, the synergy, the connection, the energy, everything that moves is so powerful. As a principal, I sit back in awe of my staff every single day, because they step into spaces for kids and love them through the most challenging things, and yet they still have high expectations and accountability for them. It's such an amazing and graceful and systematic place to watch that is remarkable.
And I agree. And when you feel it click, you know it clicks because the system can run without you. And that's hard to say, because you think, oh, like I need to feel needed. I need to feel wanted. But when it really clicks. And so for us, as we went through this pandemic and quarantines and all these people gone and staff especially gone, there's days we had 20 staff members out. And like, I remember at the beginning, I'm having to send out a new lunch schedule for supervision every single day because this person's not here and this person's not here. But when it began to click and we came together as truly a school family, we talk about family so much. But when we came together as a school family is when I could walk through the hallway and this staff member would step up and say, hey, this person's not here, I got that. Or this person's not here, I got this. This is going to get taken care of today. And that's that point where you truly feel invested in as a family. And that's where you have to be, because that's what we want within our classroom with the kids that we work with. That's the same thing I want as a school leader with among staff. We have to get there.
And you know, I think that that's a key. And I think that as an administrator, we constantly have to be in that space of living in that role of a model and example, exactly what we want our teachers to be for our kids. We have to stand in that space. Sometimes that is accountability. Sometimes that's a hard conversation about, hey, you know, we've got to talk about this situation. That isn't actually, it's not how it needs to be held, right? Or that praise, or that time of going, you know what, step back a minute. I understand you're going through that at home. We've got your back.
And I think, you know, and at the root of it, and I got something in my pocket I'll show you guys in just a second that really speaks to me. At the root of being trauma informed, and it's part of that heart connection, is getting staff to a point where we humanize kids and humanize education, but getting them to understand that at the end of the day, the way that staff want to be treated and the way they want to be respected and the way they want to be valued and loved and appreciated, that's the same thing that our kids want. So if we can get to a really simple point of, and I say this all the time, if you wouldn't accept it from me, don't do it to a kid. It's as simple as that.
James, I swear, man, we are like, I mean, it's so weird. I literally say the same thing.
So this is what's inside every staff member has, and I'll read it, but every staff member has this because I want this reminder. And it says, if you wouldn't accept it from your supervisor, don't dish it out to a kid. Our kids are owed respect from you on day one. That's what will earn their respect. Because one of those, there's so many adages and things that people say in education that just drive me crazy. And one of them is like, well, that kid has to earn my respect. That's such BS. I don't even know. That's not the way they are owed your respect on day one. That's the way it's supposed to be. And so for me, like, if you wouldn't accept it from me, like, I shouldn't walk in your classroom and see you doing that to a kid.
Man, and let me tell you, that's how the conversation at my school went about clip charts in the classroom.
Oh, the same conversation. Yep.
And that's what I said. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, you all. We're not doing clip charts. What are we supposed to do? I said, I tell you what, we can continue to use clip charts, but I'm going to use it in the faculty meeting, right? So if you get your cell phone out, I'm just going to call your name. Hey, miss, blah, blah, blah. I need you to come up and clip down to a purple, right? Whatever color, magenta, whatever it is this week, right? Yeah. And it's like, whoa. And that's where that conversation comes. If you don't want me to do it to you, because it's two, it's not four, it's not with, it's two. then don't do things to kids. Do things with and for kids, right? Look at how it's going to improve them as human beings, or it's going to build them up. For some reason, we were on this system of breaking kids down
to build them up, right? You cut out for a second. I can't hear you.
Now, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. Apparently my internet connection is messed up, but let's talk about equity, because I think we don't have a lot of time left, and I know you're passionate about this, and I'm pretty sure you know I am. Where does equity fit in this work that we do? Where does it fit in the realm? Because that is right now a topic that is on the forefront of this movement, and it's time to start talking a little bit about it.
I think, one, we have to begin and willing to have the conversation. And I think it starts with us admitting and being vocal about, like, things have not been equitable all along, especially from a school setting. And I think one of the statements, I was doing a training in Orlando, and we were having this whole conversation around the question of, I can't suspend them, what do I do now? And which is a whole nother topic. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's a whole nother topic. But one of the things I said, like, trauma-informed work is rooted in equity work. They parallel each other so much. And so I have a hard time going into a district and saying, I feel like a district can't say they're trauma informed if I look at your discipline behaviors and it's inequitable. Like that, they don't go together. That tells me there's not equitable work happening in your district or in your building. And so there's things that you can do. And so for me, one of the things, as I got this job, and I got hired for this job back in February. So from February all the way through August, think about what was happening in our world. In addition to the pandemic, think about all the social injustice and all those things that were just out there. And again, those are things that I didn't want just to be elephants in the room. Those are things I wanted to tackle and have conversations with up front, because I need people to understand where I come from. And I saw earlier that Emily was on this call from Hear This Now. And one of the things that we had a conversation with earlier, I was pretty vulnerable with her. And I said, for me, the struggle is, I never want people to look at me and think I'm only concerned about equity because I'm a Black man. That's not, so I really struggle. I want them to understand I care about equity because I care about people. I care about connection. I care about loving everybody and everybody getting what they deserve and what they need to be successful.
Well, I guess that's one thing I don't have to explain. Like, I mean, honestly, like, I care as much about equity as you do.
I know.
We probably can. And it's just goes down to the work that we're doing. You're right. It's not about you being a Black man, me being a white dude with a big beard, drives a pickup truck. It's not about that. It's about what our kids deserve. And when I say our kids, I mean every single one of them. I'm talking about the kid that doesn't speak English, all the way over to the kid that has the disability that they struggle to be able to function in a normal school, right?
Yeah.
We're talking equity for all kids. The practices that we do, we know are archaic.
Yeah.
The legislator in the state of Tennessee said it best on the news an hour ago. We've been doing this for 100 years. This is what we got to get back to. You all know it's not. Yeah. And I love that you said that, like, hey, just because I'm a Black man doesn't mean I'm just to cut about equity. Because it's more than that. It's deeper than that.
And I think what makes this rooted in trauma-informed care is when I look at, and this is where some educators struggle, trauma-informed care is not black and white. Trauma-informed care lives in the gray. That's where it lives, because my response to your behavior is different than my response to this behavior based on the relationship that I have with you and me understanding your experience, right? And because of that, like, it's an equity thing. Because my response is based on equity. My response is based on knowing you, loving you, caring about you. That's why trauma-informed care is rooted in equity, because it lives in the gray.
And sometimes that gray gets messy, and it is what it is, right? But I think what you said is really important. We have to have the conversations. Like, and it's going to be uncomfortable, right? It's going to be messy. We've had these conversations at my school multiple times. Matter of fact, my staff asked for it. Like, Portel, we need to have these conversations. And at the end of the day, it can get really messy, but we have to embrace the mess. That's when we grow the most.
Yeah.
Is when we're working through some of the hardest things. So, can you believe it's been almost 45 minutes, James? And I feel like we just got off the ground. So the last question I ask every guest on this podcast, the last question I ask is always, what does James Moffett, what do you want educators to know right now from you?
It's what the message of the shirt says. It's love kids. I mean, because I think you said it at the beginning, I think we can attempt to make this really complex and really difficult and really, discombobulated, but really what it comes down to is I need kids when they walk in the building every single day to feel loved. That's what they have to feel loved. Because as crazy as it is to say that this is a new trend or a fad or whatever, which it isn't, but that's some of what we hear. Trauma-informed care is just a trend or it's a fad. It really goes back to what we learned in school. It goes back to Maslow, it goes back to Bloom's, and it's about us actually putting those things in action. We can no longer look at the top part of that pyramid and focus on the academics. We have to look at the foundation, and everything we do should be grounded in love and care for one another. If we can do that, everything else is possible. But if we can't do that basic premise, and I think that's what I feel so strongly about, is because sadly, we're not doing that in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing that collectively as a community of just people in the world. Mm-hmm. We see the fate of where we are right now. But if we can begin to, with our youngest kids, begin to let them know they're loved and they're valued and they're appreciated every single day, and we can give them opportunities to share that love and appreciation and value with others every single day, I think that's when we can begin to see a shift, not just within our schools, not just within our classrooms, but like as a community, as the world can begin to see a change. So love kids, that's all it is.
I mean, sometimes it's that simple, right? Yeah. And it is. And I agree with you 100%. So James, if I know you got I think you got a PD coming up that you're doing.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So definitely a PD on Saturday, actually. So if you guys don't like my Facebook page, my business page, it's called JM Educational Consulting. So find that. There's a PD coming up on Saturday morning, this Saturday, January 23rd from 9 a.m. to noon. It's called the Trauma-Informed School Experience. It's a virtual conference. I just want to pour out everything that I've been doing over the last 6 years. Lots of resources that I'm just going to give away to you, because really this isn't about me. This isn't about Matthew. This is about kids. And like anything that I can do to help you love kids more, love kids better, love yourself, whatever it is, I want to do that. So we'll talk about some of the pieces we talked about today, like that navigating change piece. Like, what does that really look like? There's steps to that. Within those steps, what does it look like to really connect with somebody's heart? What do you need to do as a leader? And I think the thing that's exciting about trauma-informed care, it's not always top-down. I hope it's not always top-down leadership. There should be a groundswell in this movement towards being trauma-informed. So this is for teachers, social workers, counselors. I have a library aide who signed up for this conference already. So anybody who gets to spend time with kids, I want to talk about this trauma-informed school experience. So connect with me. You can see how to register on my Facebook page. And I look forward to a lot of people joining so we can spread that message.
Awesome. And I highly recommend it. And I hope, well, I can't make it, but I will continue to pick your brain, because that's what I do, right?
What we do.
So if they also want to follow you, you gave your Facebook. Do you have any other social media people can follow you on?
Twitter is another one for me, and it's just at James Moffett Jr. So like my name you see on the screen, just add the junior on the end. Lots of stuff. Those are probably my two biggest outlets. I mean, I'll connect with people on a personal. They can add me on my personal Facebook, my personal Twitter, my personal Instagram. Doesn't matter. I just love connecting with people, because you never know when I'm going to share a message that hopefully people need to hear for kids.
And I'm right there with you. I'm like, just like my personal Facebook page. You'll see a lot of pictures of my kid, probably my bulldog, some fishing here and there, and it is what it is, right? So, well, James, thank you so much. And for all the listeners, this is a reminder that the RFP is open right now for the Trauma-Informed Educators Network Conference. It will be open until the end of the month. We will be making those decisions on those sessions by the 12th of February. We will let everybody know. The conference is going to be a 3-day virtual conference. Not full days, that's torturous. And it will be July 19th to the 21st. We have 2 keynote speakers already. One is Dr. Ricky Gibbs Jr., which was on here, who is a firecracker of a principal and a very close friend of mine. And then we also have Charles Holt, who is a remarkably gifted and talented man who was on Broadway in New York under The Lion King. And he ended up working at a school formulating a process for kids to process trauma. An amazing man. So please keep your eye out there. We will be having tickets on sale. I think it's the first week of March. Honestly, I don't remember. But if you want to follow me, you can follow me at Principal List on Instagram and as well as Twitter. And Matthew Portell, simply me with 1 T on Facebook. As always, you all, please, please, please. All right, James, we're still live on social media, but I stopped the recording of the podcast. So, man, I appreciate it. Thank you all who are out there. James, I don't know if you have a few minutes. I said it'd be till 7, but if people want to throw any questions, I see Michelle popped in one asking if it's too late to register for Saturday.
It is not at all too late. So, Michelle, if you go to that business page, you'll see the link to register, and I'll give you the information you need.
And if anybody has any questions for James, throw them into whatever social media platform you're on, and we'll try to address those. He's got a lot of knowledge, you all, and definitely a ton of fire. Every time I've ever talked to him, I feel like I'm getting this resurgence of energy. So
I feel the same way.
yeah, man, and that's what it's about. It's about inspiring each other, right? It's about inspiring everyone, because as Jim has said many times, there's not enough people doing this work, and there will never be enough people doing this work. So it's just about getting this work into the world, because educators around this globe are doing this work every day, and some of them don't even realize it, right? Just like when you said you stepped out of the room and you were like, or stepped out of the classroom and you're like, whoa, yeah. I had the same experience.
Yeah, it is. You just assume there's great things happening, and there was a lot of great things. I don't want to say there's not. But yeah, it's just important, and I felt really inspired to bridge some gaps that I saw and just bring people together to really focus on the message of loving kids.
Awesome. Well, man, I appreciate it. I don't know why the internet keeps cutting in and out, but hopefully I can figure that out before the next one.
Well, while I'm on here, I want to say congratulations to you, Mr. Principal of the Year. That's awesome. That's an incredible, well-deserved honor.
I'm going to be honest, I was shocked, and I got to admit, I don't know if you saw the picture, but the sweatshirt I had is actually one of my second graders' clothing lines. So
I need to order a shirt. I need to get that link, because I saw that link a couple weeks ago, and I told myself I'm going to order a shirt, so I will do that. Yeah,
so I was sitting in my office, and they're like, my lead principal was like, Mr. Portello, where are you right now? I'm like, in my office. Why? He's like, I'm about to ring the doorbell. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And then I go outside, and of course the superintendent's right there, and I'm like, hold on a minute, I got to explain my shirt, you all. Like, this is one of my kids' designs. So if you follow me on any social media, buy your cool kids gear. And mine says, I teach cool kids. It's super awesome. And Young C also raps. He's got his own YouTube channel. He is a remarkable kid. So, well, thanks, James. I appreciate it, man. And good luck on Saturday. I can't wait to hear.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear how it goes. And I know everybody will truly enjoy it. For all the people who listen, we appreciate it. And we'll be back next week on the 28th with Dr. Mona Delahook, Dr. Lori Desitels, and Dr. Eric Rosin. So a great 3-person conversation around their work. So thanks, James. I appreciate it, man. And I'll talk to you.